Jex Falls isn't the kind of town that gets written about in travel magazines. Population hovering around 3,000, one main street with a hardware store and a diner that closes at 6, and a coastline so rocky and unwelcoming that even the seagulls seem pissed off about it. The town's claim to fame is its name, which comes from Captain Jack Morgan, a pirate who supposedly fled British naval ships in 1699 and vanished somewhere along our stretch of coast. Local legend says he and his crew made it to shore with their plunder, but were never seen again. Most people assume they got away in a rowboat or died in the surf. I assumed that too, until 3 months ago. Mark had been obsessed with the Captain Jack story since we were kids. He'd grown up on tales his grandfather told him about hidden treasure and secret caves, the kind of thing that sounds awesome when you're 10 and pathetic when you're 27. But Mark never let it go. He'd spent years researching old naval records, studying tide patterns, hiking every inch of coastline looking for cave entrances that matched historical descriptions. His girlfriend Sarah enabled him, mostly because she found his enthusiasm charming and because she liked hiking. Me, I just went along because Mark was my best friend and I didn't have much else going on. When Mark called me that October morning, I could hear the tremor in his voice before he even said hello. "I found it, John. I actually fucking found it." He'd been exploring a section of cliff face about 2 miles north of town, somewhere we'd passed dozens of times without noticing anything unusual. But the recent storm had caused a minor rock slide, and Mark had spotted something that made him scramble down to investigate. A small opening, partially concealed by centuries of erosion and debris, but unmistakably man-made around the edges. He'd taken photos, measurements, and coordinates. He wanted to go back with proper equipment. "It's this weekend or never," he said. "Tide patterns won't be this favorable again until next year, and you know the county's been talking about putting up fencing along that whole stretch. This is it, John. This is actually it." I should have said no. I had a dozen good reasons. My knees weren't what they used to be. I had work on Monday. Cave diving, or spelunking, or whatever the hell you wanted to call crawling around in tight, dark spaces, had never been my idea of fun. But Mark had that tone in his voice, the one that meant he was going with or without me. Unfortunately, I'd known him since we were 10. I couldn't let my best friend do something that stupid alone. Sarah picked me up Saturday morning in Mark's truck, the bed already loaded with gear. Helmets with mounted lights, ropes, carabiners, a first aid kit that looked military grade, energy bars, water bottles, and what looked like a small sledgehammer.
"In case we need to widen anything," Sarah explained when she caught me staring. She was tall, athletic. From what Mark told me, she ran marathons for fun and had opinions about specific hydration packs. She worked as a physical therapist and approached Mark's treasure hunting with the same practical enthusiasm she brought to helping people recover from knee surgery. Mark's already down there doing a preliminary scout. He's been up since 4. The drive took 20 minutes, the last 5 on a dirt road that barely qualified as a path. We parked where the trees gave way to scrub grass and jagged rocks, the ocean visible as a gray-blue line in the distance. The wind coming off the water was cold enough to sting. Mark was waiting by the cliff edge, practically vibrating with excitement. He'd rigged a rope system to make the descent easier, and he walked us through it twice before we started down. The climb down wasn't terrible, maybe 30 feet of careful scrambling, but it was enough to get my heart rate up. The cave entrance was exactly as unimpressive as I'd feared. A crack in the rock face, maybe 3 feet high and 2 feet wide. Mark had cleared away some of the smaller debris, but it still looked like the Earth's asshole. "Are you sure about this?" I asked. "The historical records are clear." Mark pulled out his phone to show me a photo of a yellow document. British naval logs from HMS Dartmouth, dated November 1699. They chased Morgan's crew to this exact stretch of coast. The pirates made it to shore, but never came back out. The naval captain assumed they had a ship waiting on the other side of the peninsula, but there's no record of Morgan or his crew ever surfacing again. 18 men, John. 18 men and a cargo hold worth of Spanish silver just vanished. Maybe they drowned, I said. Then where are the bodies? Mark's eyes had that gleam I recognized, the one that meant he'd already made his mind and was just going through the motions of conversation. This cave goes somewhere. I can feel the air moving. There's space in there. Sarah was already putting on her helmet, checking her light. We stick together, we stay in radio contact, and if anything feels wrong, we turn back. Deal? I wanted to say no. I wanted to suggest we call someone official, get proper permits, and do this the right way. But I could see the desperation in Mark's face, the way his hands kept clenching and unclenching. This was his white whale, his one shot at proving all those years of research weren't wasted. Sarah was already checking her gear. Opening was right there, and I was already putting on my helmet. We went in single file. Mark first with the biggest light, then Sarah, then me bringing the rear. Now, I'm not a big guy, but the entrance was still a tight squeeze. I had to turn my shoulders and exhale to fit through. Rock scraped against my back and chest simultaneously. For about 10 feet, it felt like I was being swallowed. The walls pressed in from all sides, and then suddenly it opened up.
The first chamber was about the size of a large bedroom, the ceiling high enough to stand in most places. Our lights cut through the darkness, revealing rough stone walls and a floor that sloped gently downward. The air was cool, but not cold, with a faint smell I couldn't quite place. Mineral, maybe. Salt. Yet there was something organic underneath it all. See? Mark's voice echoed slightly. This is definitely man-made. Look at the walls. He was right. In places you could see tool marks, spots where someone had deliberately widened the passage or smoothed away irregularities. It wasn't obvious, not unless you were looking for it, but once Mark pointed it out, I couldn't unsee it. We moved deeper. The passage branched twice, but Mark seemed confident about which way to go, consulting a hand-drawn map he'd made based on his research. He'd overlaid British naval charts with geological surveys and local folklore, creating a composite that supposedly showed the most likely route the pirates would have taken. I didn't understand half of it, but Sarah seemed convinced enough to keep following. The temperature stayed consistent, that cool but not cold feeling, and the faint smell grew stronger. Not quite mineral anymore. Something else. Copper pennies, maybe. Old metal. I caught myself breathing through my mouth to avoid it, which was stupid because then I could taste it instead. About 40 minutes in, we stopped to drink water and check our bearings. Mark's excitement was palpable, but I noticed Sarah was quieter than usual. When I asked if she was okay, she just nodded and said the smell was getting to her too. We agreed to give it another hour before turning back, regardless of what we found. The passage narrowed and widened in irregular patterns, sometimes forcing us to crouch, other times opening into spaces where our lights couldn't quite reach the ceiling. In one larger chamber, we found the remains of old torches, just charred bits of wood that crumbled when Mark tried to pick one up. Evidence someone had been here before, which made the place feel more oppressive somehow. It was as if we were following in the footsteps of doomed men. "There," Sarah said suddenly, pointing her light at the wall. Scratched into the stone, barely visible, were marks. Not random scratches, but deliberate cuts, symbols that might have been letters worn smooth by time. Mark ran his fingers over them, his breath coming faster. He pulled out his phone and took several photos from different angles. "This is it," he whispered. "This is actually it. This is 17th century script, I'm sure of it. Look at the way the R's are formed and the long S that looks like an F. This is period accurate." He nearly trembling as he traced the letters, his academic background in colonial history finally paying off in the most literal way possible. The passage narrowed again, forcing us to crouch and then crawl. My knees immediately regretted every decision that had led me here.
The walls felt closer now, and I became acutely aware of the tons of rock above us, the ocean somewhere beyond that, the very real possibility of getting stuck, or lost, or worse.
After maybe 20 minutes of crawling, my hands were scraped raw, even through my gloves, and my knees felt like they'd been beaten with a hammer. The passage opened into another chamber, this one larger than the first, maybe 15 feet across and 10 feet high. Our lights played across the walls, revealing more tool marks and what looked like old scorch marks from torches. Then Mark swept his light around and froze. Holy shit! The skeleton was slumped against the far wall, still wearing the rotted remains of what might have been a coat. The fabric had long since degraded to brown tatters, but you could still make out what might have been brass buttons scattered on the ground nearby. The skull had tipped forward, jaw hanging open in a silent scream, and one arm was extended as if reaching for something. Around the bones were scraps of leather, a rusted knife that had corroded almost completely away, and what looked like the remains of a small barrel, the wooden staves collapsed inward. Sarah yelped like she'd been punched. Mark just stood there, staring, his light steady on the corpse. Is this real? Sarah asked. It's real. Mark's voice was barely above a whisper. He moved closer, careful not to disturb anything, playing his light over the remains. Look at the clothing, the style of the coat, the buttons. This is late 17th century, I'd bet my life on it. This is one of them, one of Morgan's crew. But what made us all stop and really stare was the wall behind the skeleton. Someone had carved words into the stone, not just a few marks, but entire paragraphs. The letters crude but deliberate, clearly done with something small and sharp, probably that knife, over what must have been days or weeks. The text started high up on the wall and descended in ragged columns, getting harder to read as it went down. Mark moved closer, playing his light over the text, and began to read aloud. His voice shook slightly. November 15th, 1699. We are 12 now. The cave goes deeper than we thought. Captain says there's a way through to the other side of the peninsula, but Davies and Mockton went looking 2 days past and haven't returned. We hear them sometimes, calling from below, but we search and find nothing. The handwriting was rough, the spelling inconsistent in the way of men who'd learned their letters late in life, but the message was clear. Mark moved his light down, finding more text carved in shaking lines. November 18th. The food is running low. Captain has ordered rationing. We dare not go back the way we came. The Navy dogs are surely waiting at the entrance. James swears he heard Davies. They say he hears voices calling from somewhere below, but we search and find nothing. The air tastes wrong down here. Thomas says it's the damp, but I know better. Something's not right. Jesus, Sarah breathed. She moved closer to me, and I realized she was shaking. More text, the letters growing more cramped and erratic as they descended the wall, like the writer had been running out of space, or time, or sanity. November 22nd. 5 more are gone. They went deeper, seeking another way out, seeking fresh air, seeking anything but this tomb. The captain is changing. He speaks of voices in the dark. William says the treasure is cursed, and we should leave it, abandon it in the deepest hole we can find. But the captain will not hear of it. He guards it like a dragon guards gold in the old stories my mother used to tell. The walls feel warm to the touch now, which makes no sense this deep. We are far below the sun's reach. The water that drips from above is thick and sticky, not clean like it should be. It leaves stains on our clothes. Jacob drank some yesterday, despite warnings, and has been sick ever since. He cannot stop shitting himself. The smell is awful. I reached out and touched the wall where the writer had mentioned warmth. The corpse was right. It was warm. Not hot, but distinctly warmer than it should be this far underground. At least 10 degrees warmer than the air around it. I pulled my hand back and found my fingertips slightly damp with that same sticky residue. "Keep reading," I said. Mark continued, his light moving to text that was barely legible now. The letters scratched so hard and fast that they gouged the stone in places, leaving deep furrows that our lights cast shadows in. November 27th. 3 of us remain. Jacob died yesterday. We buried him in the tunnel, but this morning he was gone, as if the cave swallowed him whole. The captain has taken the treasure and Thomas deeper into the cave. He says the voices told him where to go. He is mad. We are all mad. The cave breathes, I swear it. At night I hear it, a great bellowing sound like a whale. The walls pulse. Yesterday I saw John Carver embedded in the rock up to his waist, still alive but unable to move, his eyes following me as I passed. He was begging me for help, but I did not know what to do. I tried to dig him out, but the rock was soft like clay, and it only made him sink deeper. When I returned hours later, he was gone. Only a stain remaining like someone had spilled wine. The thing in the caves, it hungers. It feeds slowly. It savors. Okay, we should go back. Are you kidding? Mark's eyes were wild in the light of his headlamp. This is it, John. This is the actual historical record of what happened to them. And the treasure, he says the captain took it deeper. It's still down here. Mark, this is clearly a man losing his mind, Sarah said, but I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. Walls that breathe? People embedded in rock? He was starving and dehydrated.
Then explain this. Mark pointed to a spot on the wall where the text ended. There, carved with what must have been the last of the writer's strength, were final words. It took them all. It will not let us leave. Below that, a date, December 3rd, 1699. And below that, scratched so deep the stone had cracked. It beats. The silence that followed was only broken by the sound of our breathing and a faint dripping somewhere in the darkness beyond our lights. "There's another passage," Mark said, pointing to a gap in the far wall. "If the captain went deeper, that's where he'd have gone. The treasure is down there." "Mark, no," I said. "This is insane. We should document this. Come back with professionals." "By the time we do that, the county will have sealed the cave. You know they will. This is our one chance." He was already moving toward the gap, Sarah following after a moment's hesitation. I looked at the skeleton one more time, at those empty eye sockets and that reaching hand, and then I followed my friends deeper into the earth. The passage was tighter than anything we'd encountered so far, a squeeze that required removing our packs and pushing them ahead of us while we crawled on our bellies. The rock pressed in from all sides, and for one horrible moment I was certain I'd gotten stuck, my chest too large for the gap, my hips wedged between unyielding stone. Then something gave way, and I popped through into a larger space where Mark and Sarah were waiting. "You okay?" Sarah asked. I nodded, not trusting my voice. My hands were shaking. This chamber was different from the others. The walls had a strange texture, less like rock and more like something else. Coral, maybe, or cartilage. And the smell was stronger here, that copper penny scent mixed with something organic and faintly rotten. Mark ran his hand along the wall and frowned. "This doesn't feel like limestone." "What does it feel like?" Sarah asked. "I don't know. It's softer and warm. Really warm."
I touched the wall myself and immediately regretted it. He was right. It was warm, almost body temperature, and the surface had a slightly yielding quality, like pressing on firm rubber. When I pulled my hand away, my fingertips came back damp with something that wasn't quite water. It was thicker, slightly viscous. When I rubbed my fingers together, it felt alkaline, like the slick you get from dissolving soap. "We should turn back," I said again.
Look. Mark's light had found something embedded in the wall. A coin. A gold coin. Its surface tarnished green, but unmistakable. Spanish doubloon. Has to be. Sarah, take a photo. She did, her camera flash momentarily blinding us all. Mark pulled out a small pry bar from his pack and began working at the coin. Mark, don't. The coin came free with a wet, sucking sound. Mark held it up triumphantly, turning it in the light. Then Sarah made a sound, and we both looked to where she was pointing. The wall where the coin had been was bleeding. I wish it was stained water or some mineral seepage. But it was blood. Thick, dark blood that welled up from the hole and began to run down the wall in slow rivulets. "What the whispered. The wall around the wound began to pulse, slowly at first, then faster, a rhythmic motion that spread outward in ripples. And somewhere in the distance, deep in the cave, we heard it. A sound like thunder, like drums, like a heartbeat. Thump, 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 thump. "Okay," Sarah said, her voice tight. "Okay, maybe we should..." The wall bled faster, the blood now flowing freely, and more of those pulsing ripples spread outward. In my peripheral vision I saw movement, other areas of the wall beginning to shift and flex. "We need to go," Sarah said. "Now." But Mark was already moving forward, his light catching something in the passage ahead. "Wait, do you see that?" More coins, dozens of them, embedded in the walls and floor like metal studs and leather, and beyond them, a larger space. A chamber. Against every instinct I had, we moved forward. The walls here were unmistakably organic. The texture was wrong, the color was wrong. It had shifted from gray stone to something redder, mottled with darker patches that looked disturbingly like bruises. The floor was wet, covered in a thin film of that same viscous fluid, and our boots made soft squelching sounds with each step. The heartbeat sound was louder now, no longer distant. It echoed from all directions, making it impossible to tell where it was coming from. Thump, thump. Thump, thump. Thump, thump. The chamber opened before us, and Mark's light sounded the treasure.